What people in regional Australia have to fear is inaction on climate change. We saw that with the bushfires in Victoria, in South Australia, and in the coasts of New South Wales, but also in Queensland, just a short period of time ago. Remember, in the lead up to those bushfires, and indeed while they were raging, National and Liberal Party members, including the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister of the time, being critical of the idea that the bushfires had any connection whatsoever with climate change. People in the regions and in the agricultural sector have a lot to fear from drought. People in the regions have a lot to fear from the threat that climate change represents to the Great Barrier Reef, to Kakadu, to some of our great tourism icons that create jobs in regional Australia. The fact is that this government have failed to act. And if they come up with some form of action in order to get them across the line, in order to pretend that they're doing something in the lead up to the next federal election, Australians know that they can't be taken seriously because they've had 3 terms to act. Just as John Howard refused to ratify the Kyoto Protocol and was in office for those 12 years, towards the end, John Howard came up with a policy of supporting an emissions trading scheme, of supporting ratification of Kyoto Protocol, but they never did it. And when they formed government again after 2013, they undid or tried to undo every bit of positive action that was taken by the former Labor government. We know that those people in the Liberal and National Party who drag their feet on this issue won't change their position. We know that this government is incapable of moving forward.
Now, it's clear that this regional city divide is being stoked in the climate change argument. You're an inner city MP who's saying the Labor government is going to be key to taking action on climate change. But how are you going to get those regional people on board after the divisiveness of this argument so far?
Well, the divisiveness in this debate is just within the Liberal Party, within the National Party, and between the Liberal and the National parties. Australians know that action on climate change is a positive measure for Australia to do. Australians know that Australia has more at stake from global warming than many other countries around the world. But this government is frozen in time while the world warms around it. And the consequences are there, with more droughts, with more bushfires, with more extreme weather events. And we're seeing that played out around the world. Every bit of climate activity isn't directly attributable to climate change. There have always been bushfires, it's true. There have always been extreme weather events. But what we know is that those events are more often and they're more extreme than they were before. We know that that is occurring. We know that climate change is real. The problem for the government is that they have so many people in their ranks who don't believe it's real when it comes down to it. We have a Prime Minister who ridiculed action on climate change before. And we know in terms of our regions that the regions have enormous benefit from action on climate change. I visited North Queensland with Bob Catter, visited the Kidston Project, Big Kennedy and Little Kennedy, renewable energy projects, creating jobs around Hewenden and other parts of far North Queensland. We know that there's enormous benefit can be got from transforming manufacturing with clean energy, driving down those prices to manufacture goods here in Australia. We know as well that Australia can be a renewable energy superpower, the largest solar farm in the world being built right near Tennant Creek, exporting power to Singapore as a result of the Sun Cable project. There are so many benefits, particularly for regional Australia, but there's also an enormous cost of inaction. And that's something that Josh Frydenberg, in his discovery of climate change, recently pointed out that there will be an enormous cost to the Australian economy unless action is taken. And the hypocrisy of someone who's now Treasurer but was Energy Minister and hasn't taken any action, has been a barrier to that action, is not lost on the Australian people.